Hello and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. Today, our discussion will center around the concept of meaningful connectivity. It is a term that is being used more frequently these days as there is greater reliance on technology and consequently the extent to which people have access to it and are able to leverage it. However, in 2019, the Alliance for Affordable Internet, which is an initiative of the Web Foundation, had proposed some targets for meaningful connectivity, which will be the jump-off point for this discussion with our two guests who are also from A4Ai. First, we have research analyst Ana Maria Rodriguez and Yacine Khelladi, who is no stranger to the podcast and to the Caribbean tech community, as he's the moderator of the Caribbean ICT Stakeholders Virtual Community Civic. However, Yacine wears many hats, and within the context of this conversation, he is the Latin America and the Caribbean coordinator for A4Ai. Anna and Yacine, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, so I guess let's just jump right in. And perhaps we could start by just giving us a sense as to what the impetus was for A4Ai conceptualizing and thinking about meaningful connectivity and setting some targets for it.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle, for having us here. It's a pleasure to be with ICT Pulse. So A4Ai, we started with these meaningful connectivity targets because we thought that the binary that we are using right now as a measure of who is connected and who is not enough. So we know that over half of the world is now online, but many people lack the quality of access they need to unlock the full power of internet access. That's why we believe it's time to unlock the full power of internet and raise the bar for the bar for internet access and aim for meaningful connectivity for everyone. So we need to push for more. It's not enough to know who is connected and who's not, but it's important to understand how are people connecting. Those that are connected, how are they connecting? Are they having a meaningful experience when they connect, or are they not?
Understood. And Yacine, perhaps you can share with us what might be some of the targets that have been set.
Before that, I was just reinforce that point that before everything was okay. So in rural Jamaica, we have 90% people connected because they have a phone with I don't know the number. I'm just guessing. They have a phone with a data connection. So that means that they are connected. But when you deep digger, and I am in rural Dominican Republic, they have very limited access in terms of the speed, the quality, and they cannot afford to have a lot of data. So they will just recharge a little bit of data from time to time, or they have a free zero rating with some WhatsApp, and that's it. But they're not really having the connectivity that allows them to enjoy the full experience of the internet. So the idea was to check how well they're connected. So we have unconnected, we have connected, and among those connected, we have well connected and poorly connected. So that is more or less the concept behind it.
Excellent. And probably just share with us what the targets were, the targets that have been set. So, because I guess here it is that, you have not connected, and there's a wide spectrum between that and then the degree of connectivity thereafter, as you're saying, because one may be able to buy, a cheap sort of data plan, or you're accessing just zero rated sites or something, but not, I guess, what then does it mean to be meaningfully connected?
Yeah, so what we understand as meaningful connectivity is when a user has access to a smartphone, a 4G mobile internet, along with an unlimited access point. It could be at home or place of work or the place where they study, and that they have this connection every day. So those are like the components of the concept of meaningful connectivity. So you must have 4G mobile connection, a smartphone, sufficient data, and as well sufficient relevance, so you can connect every day.
Wonderful. So these targets were proposed last year. What has been the feedback so far? I know that there have been some consultations. Yacine facilitated one a few months ago for the Caribbean region. So what has been the feedback in other parts of the world?
Okay, no, just, I mean, at least in Latin America, it was very well received in terms of opening the conversation. I think a lot of people are very happy to get out of that binary definition, connected and unconnected, and look deeper to see how well the people are connected and how we can develop policies and strategies to have everybody meaningfully connected. There've been a lot of conversation around the proposed targets, which we say are the minimal targets, like, for example, the device, minimally a smartphone, and that is based, and I think Anna can explain better, based on the survey and research we did about what the people wanted and what they understood was a meaningful connectivity. But those are what we always repeat, it's minimal targets. It doesn't mean it's the ideal one, but it's the minimal that people should have to be able to benefit from a meaningful use experience. That's one thing. So there's been a lot of conversation around that, and there's been a lot of conversation about how to implement that now. So because we are proposing that as targets, so we are proposing both to have a regular kind of measuring, how you can measure, how you can monitor, how meaningfully are your populations connected or specific target groups, and then what are the policies, the regulations, the projects, the programs, what can you do to ensure that first, when you are bringing people from unconnected to connected, you do it so they are that it's done in a meaningful way. And then those who are not meaningfully connected, how they can become meaningfully connected users. So in terms of policy of implementation, it has opened a lot of discussion. So it's not anymore just about bringing coverage to region, but ensuring that there is adoption and that it's affordable and that there is a device and that there is the skills and then there is unlimited data somewhere that they can access unlimited data to do everything they need to do. And in particular now with the COVID pandemic, it has become more and more clear that limited data connections, for example, in one household cannot ensure that the whole household can thrive, learn, work remotely and socialize and get informed with a limited data connection. So all that has brought up the level, let's say, of the urgency to address the meaningfulness of the connection.
Indeed, and I think that is certainly a concern, and some, as I've indicated in the introduction, like I'm hearing the term meaningful connectivity being used more and more, but not necessarily within the context of what A4Ai is proposing as targets, but you looking at the reality of of COVID-19 and the impact that it's having in our societies, and the fact that we now need to leverage technology more than we ever had before. So what are the things, at least and I probably want to go through each of the targets, starting with the whole issue of the smartphone as an appropriate device. And I can generally appreciate why that was proposed. Certainly here in the Caribbean region, you have probably almost, ubiquitous coverage of the smartphone technology, the mobile technology, and smartphones have dropped in price considerably, so that it is probably the first way in which people connect to telecommunications and the internet, for example, not necessarily with a fixed line telephone or other means. But we have here in the Caribbean, and within the context of COVID-19, that you have schools across the region, clamoring to buy tablet computers for students. But then there is I guess, hindsight appreciation, though, that these tablets and even smartphones have limited functionality, and therefore the challenges, for example, as it relates to e-learning and remote learning, which is probably going to become, at least until we probably have a better handle on COVID-19, which is probably going to become the norm, or certainly more of what you're seeing within the education system across the region. So are smartphones good enough as a minimum target. Anna, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so as Yacine mentioned before, this is our minimal target, and we recognize the smartphone as a tool that can enable people to get access and to get online and to use the power of the internet. And we reached this conclusion because we did surveys in different countries. In different regions as well. We collected data from these countries, and we also had focus groups with the people there. And they told us that the smartphone was what they really needed. This is because they want to create content, and the smartphone allows them to do that because they want audiovisual content as well. And the smartphone allows you to have video there and explore things from an audiovisual perspective. And then as well, because it's easy to have the smartphone, so people, some of them, they work a lot, of course, as many of us do, so they have to transport, to use public transportation, so the smartphone is an easy tool that they can take with them wherever they go. It gives them a lot of privacy as well because they are using the smartphone themselves. So the smartphone in the focus groups that we did and in the whole research was that tool, that minimal tool that people wanted to have and to have access to that. So as we have said before, is the minimal one. We recognize that laptops are better, for example, for education, for having access to different things. But we believe that the smartphone is a good entry point for people to get a good connectivity, good access, and experience the power of the internet.
That is true.
Yeah. I wanted to add to that it's always it's complex thinking because okay, a smartphone you can make a pictures and make a small video upload. There is something happening in your community, you can send that. It's very powerful, but you can't code, for example, or it's difficult to code or to create a document or a multimedia presentation on a smartphone. You still can, but it's quite complicated. So it's a very tricky question. But in any case, this is a proposition for a minimal, and that the countries can, or the policymakers can adjust to their understanding and reality and particular context. A country could decide that they are going to measure how well are the people connected, so they can move people from poorly connected to meaningfully connected, and instead they are going to measure if they have a smartphone, but also if they have also access to a laptop to do things, for example. So it's a proposition that can be moduled and adapted to local needs or contexts or specific policies. So I wouldn't stress too much that people must have a smartphone and that's the most important thing. It's just we measure one thing: if they have the device, the connectivity, the speed, the frequency of access, and the quality of access, then they are meaningfully connected, whatever this device is. Just let us focus too much on what is the device. The important is that they have and they own probably a device so they can have a meaningful use.
Understood, but Anna, I guess based on a report that I scanned through this morning, I noted though that all smartphones are not made equal, and then there's the question as to the functionality of the smartphone, the cost of the smartphone, and the affordability of the device. And I think especially for the people who are probably not connected, and of course there may be those who are not as well connected as we would like in terms of connected to the internet, the whole issue of affordability, I think, comes to the fore, and the quality of the smartphone that they are using in order to have this meaningful access, meaningful connectivity. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so you looked at our most recent report on
Yes.
From Luxury to Lifeline, where we talk about the device affordability. And we explored this topic because we believe and we have recognized the devices as a barrier for connectivity. And so we looked at the devices in a deep way, and we explore how much do they cost in different regions across different countries. And we found out that they are indeed a barrier. When it comes to affordability, around 2.5 billion people across the world find a smartphone very expensive based on their average monthly income. So it's still a topic that we need to work on, and we encourage governments and policymakers to work on it because we recognize it as a barrier. So if they cannot afford a smartphone, how are we going to think about laptops and other devices that could offer them better experiences using the web? So we say let's think about the cheapest device that you can afford, and that's the smartphone that will allow you to experience a good access and to explore things on the web and connect in a proper way, with quality. So we explore the devices and we say, okay, in connection to meaningful connectivity, the smartphone is that device that will allow you to connect meaningfully. And in the report, in our research, we found out, as I said, that it is a barrier. So we need to recognize that as well. And of course, you have a wide range of devices, different smartphones that offer different types of experiences. We didn't explore that much what's the difference between this smartphone and the other one, but we looked at phones in this way. So you have basic phones, you have feature phones, and you have smartphones. So that's the difference that we make among the devices, and we say that the smartphone is the one that will offer you a good experience when you browse in the internet, and then feature phones offer you a more basic experience, and then the basic one you can only use it for calls and messages. So we encourage governments to adopt the smartphone as a device that people should have and should be able to afford.
Mm-hmm. I can add. You should go and check that report, and it's very interesting to see that metrics about which is the one that attracts the attention. No, how many days you need to work to afford that smartphone.
Yes.
And you can compare. We can apply that and develop that in the Caribbean, or you can using the same methodology and see compare how many days has in a month has to work a Bayesian or a Kititian or a Dominican or a Haitian to afford the same smartphone in its country, and it will include all the elements of cost, including taxes and things like that. And that adds up to the affordability of the internet itself. As you know, we've been pioneers in setting the standard or the methodology and the threshold for defining what is affordable, which
yes.
The ITU has adopted as a 2-per-1. So 1 gigabyte of mobile data available during a month that you can buy in reality for less than 2% of your average income, and then you can measure. And if you go deeper, you see the rural divide, you see the gender divide, you see the income divide come across all that, the affordability of the broadband and the affordability of the device, and it adds up. So behind that, the thinking is you need specific policies, you need specific actions, you need specific programs to target those barriers among specific population. Women, rural, poor, disadvantaged communities. What are you going to do to address those affordability barriers, both of broadband access and device? And then you add up the other things like skills, and capacities, and all that. And then you have some kind of universal connectivity or access policy in place.
Understood. Yacine, though, and you mentioned it in terms of this, I guess the chart and the discussion within the report about how many days one has to work to afford, a device, and I was thinking about it within the context of families, and I guess lower income families where they may where a couple or a single mother may have 2 or 3 children, and I guess within our current circumstances where, as I said, remote learning is becoming part of the whole teaching and learning methodology. Sometimes when we think about meaningful connectivity and everybody getting connected, that 1 or 2 people may have responsibility for a number of other people, so parents for their children, and to facilitate their connectivity. Because one of the challenges I think that is becoming evident in Jamaica as students are getting back to school is that their parents may have a smartphone, but they as children do not, and they need to have some access to the internet or to the digital platforms that their schools are using in order to learn. So I don't know if, for example, you may want to share some insight as to what you see, for example, since you spend a lot of time in rural Dominican Republic as it relates to connectivity, children, and the affordability that families have to provide for their kids.
Well, here it's, I mean, it's emblematic. A few months ago, we had in all the newspaper, we have 94% of 4G LTE coverage. We are a hyper-connected society. We have, more than a mobile phone I mean, more than 100% of mobile phones ownership, and so on, so on. Then came COVID. Then came the need to do remote schooling. And then we find out that it's all that was not real or not true or not true enough, let's say.
Yes.
In the small village where I live here, and I talk with the teachers every day almost. There's one teacher specifically who's starting now to train the professors to start using computers, and he's telling me of 30 professors in this village, in this community, only 5 know how to use a computer. So they're just starting. And in the families, although all the families might have a phone, 80% of the children wouldn't own one that they can use when they need. And if there is one in the house with a limited data package, people here buy 1 day data or a small amount of data for 2 or 3 days. And whoever pays for that doesn't want to share the limited data that he can with 5 children in the same house, and it's very complicated. So the only solution that the government have found, at least for this village here, is to have television and not forget about, but I mean, it's quite complicated. Plus we have the electricity problem here. We have usually 4 or 5 hours in the morning without electricity, and then at night again. So if there is no electricity, not even television will work. So it's complex. I mean, it's a very complex. Nobody was waiting for this pandemic to come, of course, and nobody was prepared. But the good thing, it has unveiled the deepness of the divides, the deepness of the unconnectedness of the people. And one telephone in one family with 5, 6 children. And it's not only that, but they're in 2 rooms. How you can have 5 children studying in one room with one phone?
Yes. As you said, it's complicated, and I guess far deeper than what A4Ai can solve.
No, but at least we have unveiled. I mean, we have reinforced the need for targeted public policies. That connectivity was not solved with coverage.
Indeed.
That use was not solved with just saying we are hyper connected with 4G everywhere. That people are not using it, they don't have a device, they cannot afford it, they don't know how to use it, etc. So it has really unveiled the reality, and it has we are naked now.
Indeed.
So we have to act.
Indeed. And Anna, let me throw this gender divide question to you, and Yacine, chime in as well, because I was going through the report, another A4Ai report, I think, coming out of whether or not the impetus was meaningful connectivity, but it was primarily focused on the gender divide. And the at least the report's findings was that for many countries, women don't access the internet as frequently or as readily as men. They don't have access to smart devices to the same degree as men, etc. And I was reading it, and at least now this is just general observation for me, and I kind of polled a couple of friends quickly, and I think here in the Caribbean, because I don't think any, at least of the Caribbean islands, were featured or covered within that report, that the observations made in the report may not necessarily be what we think we see on the ground, because I think here, at least let's say in Jamaica where I am, there is a sense that women might be more connected to the internet than men. Women may be more educated than men as it relates to school enrollment and so on, and therefore the metrics and the focus on the gender divide, probably from the perspective of women probably being the more marginalized of the genders, is it might be the reverse in the Caribbean. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or any sort of observations. And as I said, Yacine, chime in and probably share what your experiences and perspectives as well.
Thank you. Yes. So, yeah, unfortunately, in the report we didn't cover any. We didn't conduct any surveys in the Caribbean. But it's interesting that you are telling me that that's not the case, and I'm happy to hear that. That's not the case, and I'm happy to hear that women are actually more connected and probably more educated than men in the Caribbean. But maybe that leads to, for example, if you look at in our findings, in internet access, in the basic internet access, we did find that, for example, in a country, to name one from Latin America, in Colombia, the gender gap in basic internet access it's non-existent, more or less. So it's only 0.9% the gender gap. So the women that are connected are 83% more or less, and then men are 84% more or less as well. So there's parity there, So both of them are experiencing the internet in the same way, the basic one. But then when you look at the meaningful connectivity, the gender gap appears, and then you have a 17% gender gap, with more or less only 47% of women having a meaningful connectivity. So I don't know if that's, maybe if we look into the Caribbean, we may find a gender gap in meaningful connectivity. I don't know, but it's interesting to think the gender gap in that way, in the meaningful connectivity gap, not only in the basic internet use, but go deeper and explore, are the women having sufficient data? Are they using it daily? And how it compares to the experience that men have in the internet. In the report also, we found that, for example, we are not creating as much content as men, unfortunately.
Right.
Yeah, so I don't know what's experienced in the Caribbean. Maybe Yacine can tell us a little bit more about that. But those were the things, and I'm happy to hear that might not be the case for the region, and that there's hope.
I think there is room for research here and investigating a bit more deeply what does it mean. I know, well, there are many Caribbeans,
Yes.
Haiti and Dominican Republic, that are 10 million each, 10 million inhabitants, poorly counted each. There is a big gap in income, for example, related to gender. For the same job and etc., women will get less paid, and for the poorer, there are more, for example, households headed by women. I was just looking at some statistics for the working on the Dominican Republic broadband plan data. 60% of the poor households are headed by women. So there are gaps, especially when you come to rural and poor, which probably mean that they have less income to dedicate to buy this expensive connection.
Indeed.
So we could look there at the way that they socialize online also is different. The level of online gender-based violence against women, where even if it's not explicitly, they will just inhibit themselves from expressing, for example, or from doing a lot of things online because of the fear of violence. I haven't seen the poorly called revenge porn, for example, against men. It doesn't happen so much.
Yes.
So all this kind of thing might in the English-speaking Caribbean too happen, and tell us that women don't have the same experience as men online. Well, affordability may be in the English-speaking Caribbean, where women have good income compared to men. I'm guessing. I'm not completely sure, but given the education levels, now the device also. When you have a device in a family, is shared. Probably in a household, the man will use it more and the women less.
Yes.
The girls less. The girls are told to go and help the mother in cleaning the house, and while the boys can play online. So these kind of things, there's really a lot to explore there. We don't live in a society that is completely equal in terms of access and rights between men and women. I mean, when you say we, in the whole Caribbean.
Yes.
And that probably reflects online. I mean, usually what I've learned from 25 years working in the ICT is that whatever disbalance or inequity you see in the real life, it will amplify, or sometimes if you don't pay attention, it can amplify. If you pay attention, you maybe limit it or even try to revert it, but it does in the online world. So the level of engagement, participation, leadership. I don't know how many how many tech companies in Jamaica are led by women compared to men. Even if the majority of the students in the university, the UE or the UTech are, the UE, I'm sure, are women. How many of those end up heading, ICT companies and creating online content and this kind of thing? You can look at that, and you will see that it's not all. I mean, you have to have second looks and dig deeper into the
Yes.
gender divides
Yes.
to
Yes.
understand how the social dynamics behind it. That's what I think. So to come back to ownership and affordability, maybe it's okay, but then the whole experience needs to be, I think, better studied.
Understood. I definitely hope that there can be some more study of the gender divide in the Caribbean region, because as the initial observations would probably suggest one thing, but oftentimes, and maybe it may be consistent with what it obtains globally, but I don't think we probably do enough research here in the region to fully uncover and understand the dynamics that are at play. All right, so just moving on to probably looking at probably one of the other targets. And I think for one of the targets one has is unlimited access. And do you consider it tied to the minimum connectivity that you all are proposing, which it would be 4G as a target, connectivity speed? Or are you thinking of it as two separate things? Anna?
Yeah, they are connected, but as well for unlimited connection, we as well have some. For example, we recognize the importance of public access. So we maybe the person doesn't have the unlimited connection at home, but maybe they have it at work or where they study. So we recognize, for example, the unlimited connection to be a thing that you can find in different places, and the whole target is connected, like all the thresholds are connected. So in order to have meaningful connectivity, you need to have the four of them. But the unlimited connection as well, we think that, for example, it doesn't have to be at your home, but it could be elsewhere. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes.
Yeah, and the 4G is how you say, is used as a word to approach the speed or the quality of the speed. It's not about the technology 4G. It's not limited to. We're talking about that technology. We're talking about the kind of experience where you can, download quickly a video tutorial, a movie, or upload very quickly with a good upload speed something that you produced or anything like that.
Yacine, you're breaking up a lot, so just probably pause for a minute.
I can tell you why did we choose 4G in the meantime.
Okay.
It's because it was easier for the people we surveyed to understand what's 4G, and we didn't want to ask them about, for example, beats per second or more technical approaches to the speed.
Okay.
So when you ask them, what do you recognize as a good technology, to access internet, it's easier for them to tell you, well, it's easier, for example, to mention 3G or even 4G or 3.5G. So it was easier for them to identify what connection were they using or the one that they would like to have in order to have a good connectivity. 4G and 3G and 2G were the easier ways to approach the question and for them to understand what were we talking about when they were asked, do you have sufficient speed? So it's because it's easier to communicate, and it's people understand it more easily when you talk about 4G, 3G. than when you talk about, for example, bits per second.
Understood.
Okay. So and before my 4G connection was failing a little bit, I just wanted to say, and it's true, it's a 4G with an external antenna here in the house. It's a household plan. So I'm paying a 4G using the same 4G technology, but I cannot use it as a mobile device. I cannot go out of this cell with
Understood.
it. So it's 4G mobile technology because I'm in a rural area without copper, without fiber, but it's a home plan. It's a house plan. I don't know how you call it in English,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
it's not a mobile plan. So I'm
Yes.
paying a bit less, or maybe half of the price of the mobile plan, and I don't have that limit, or I don't have the same cap or limit on the data, which is one of the biggest issues I have with mobile internet connectivity.
Indeed.
Yeah, and we advocate both for mobile and fixed affordable internet. So it's not one or the other; it's both of them, and whatever works best for the context or for the region, for the country, go for that. But we advocate for both of them, and to have affordability in both of them.
Indeed. But now there's actually, as much as one is looking at 4G as probably an indication of the speed, the reality is that mobile cellular technology might be the easiest, the more expedient way of deploying the sort of connectivity and the coverage that one needs to cover, like, rural communities such as where Yacine is. And whether, as much as 4G might represent more the transmission speed, the reality is that may be the technology that may need to be deployed to give us the coverage that is needed. But achieving that, realizing that the expansion of the networks and bumping up the bandwidth, so the infrastructure to accommodate the traffic, that, if all households were connected, if everyone was connected, that is a significant investment which the telecoms operators, for example, here in the region, but I'm sure worldwide, may not be keen to embrace because it is not cost effective. And since many of these telcos are private entities, the business model has to work. So, what are your thoughts generally on this, and probably what might be options you think that countries could consider to manage this challenge? Anna, you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So we recognize that limitation. I mean, it's very expensive for example, for the private companies to go to rural areas and offer the population a 4G connection, for example. But we also recognize that there are innovative solutions for that. If governments, for example, work with the private company and find, for example, a scheme where a solution where an innovative one, where, for example, they can start taking the technology to a rural areas, for example, just for the school to start with. And then you start developing a market there and start educating the people on what are the benefits for the internet. And we have had a couple of examples from the Latin American region, and I have seen that some countries have started working in this way. So government and private companies, the government encourages the private companies to go to these isolated areas. They recognize that a fixed connection, for example, is very expensive, but they know that there are some other ways to teach the market on the importance of the internet and start, for example, by giving connectivity 4G, for example, for the school, and giving free access until certain extent to the people, and then they start charging a little bit more for an extra GB, and that way you start educating the market, and together with the government and the private companies, they can start developing that market, and with good results, I believe. It's a good approach and it's innovative. Of course, the resources must be in place, but there are ways to find and get that connectivity to the people that needs it in the rural areas.
Indeed. Ideally, you have that dialogue with as I was saying, with the private sector, and the potential investors, and you come up with a whole strategy. And if you have a broadband plan where you can put all that together, it's even better. For some parts, you can, for example, incentivize infrastructure sharing. So instead of having one company investing and the competition being based on infrastructure, you can have them share the network, or you can have a PPP and public-private partnership and have a cost sharing of the investment to bring the connectivity, and then have competition on services at the end in the communities, or encourage to have community networks which reduce up to 75% in Mexico the operation cost of a local network to provide local connectivity. In other cases, you can also, for example, have a differentiated approach in terms of spectrum and taxes and incentives for rural areas instead of charging the same spectrum. In particular, the spectrum that allows to bring a signal across mountains or on top of mountains and very far cheaper, like the 700 megahertz frequencies. You can have those be allocated or tendered at a reduced or no cost for those who are going to connect those remote places and villages. Or you can ask, I'll check if your customs and taxes people agree to defiscalize or give incentives for those who are going to invest in these areas. So there are so many things you can do if you sit and look at all the options to bring the connectivity, a good connectivity, to these places. So if you cannot stimulate the market, if you can subsidize the capex, the first investments, and then if none of those is possible, is still too poor and there is no return on investment in that region, then you would look for fully subsidized kind of solutions or alternative model as community networks. So there is a whole menu of solutions. The important thing is to sit with all the actors, to think beyond just simply deploying infrastructure, but to think about the whole systemic impact of that. Often you're not just putting connectivity, you're enabling jobs, you're enabling security, you're enabling new business opportunities. So you have to put that in the equation, all the other benefits and potential externalities of bringing connectivity in those villages. So the bill is you feel the bill is lower when you get all these impacts and benefits. So that's the idea.
Understood. Understood. And as we wind down, I think just the last target, which is one with regard to regular use, which I think one defined as everyday, the target of everyday use. But I generally have a concern about whether or not that use is meaningful and purposeful, because I think I see it time and again where people are just using their phones probably just to send WhatsApp messages, browse the net, go on social media. And I guess I'm not necessarily turning my nose up, but is that all? And I therefore wonder whether or not the push thereafter. Once one then has access in a regular access, is the whole issue of content, and whether or not the content is relevant and to facilitate people improving people's everyday lives, and not solely just probably for entertainment purposes. What are your thoughts, Anna? Let's start with you.
Yeah. So I think COVID has shown us that we really use the internet for work, to stay connected with our family and friends, to access vital information, to browse content that is relevant for our education. So the content. So we're using the internet, and I think COVID has made this more relevant and has made the internet a lifeline to access that relevant content that we all need for our daily lives. So I believe that people, of course, use the internet for sending WhatsApp messages and things like that. But I think during these difficult times, it has shown us that we really need the internet to stay connected in many, many ways, and that the content is there, and that maybe we need to educate and give the people social digital skills so they understand what's in the web for them to change their lives socially and economically. But there's a lot of opportunities there in terms of content that we can access and that people everywhere can benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, I remember like 20 years ago, we had that network called the Methodology for Social Impact of ICTs, Mystica. And we were looking at how people use just simple use when they start doing different things, when they're being empowered, and when they try creating new things. And all was like a process, of empowerment across the use of the internet. And that requires, of course, a lot of things, and not only things that are related to digital, but also to social, cultural, psychological elements. So it's just one tool in that. But the fact here for this meaningful connectivity targets is, do people have enough access? Can they access every day? Are they accessing every day? Before we were measuring the ITU, it's have you used in the last 30 days, I think it's now, but it was before even in the last 3 months. So people will say, no, we counted the population that is connected because they have used once in this month. That's really not any use.
Yes.
You can do once a month. But in any case, now we're saying they should have the opportunity to use every day. And that's the base. Now, what they do with it, of course, requires a lot of the other things from capacity, consciousness, purpose, integrated into something meaningful that they are going to do, etc., etc. So, but who are we to judge if connecting with your beloved ones through a WhatsApp group and sending jokes is not something essential to life?
Yes.
Especially now, I cannot morally judge that you're not doing the right things because you're looking at video and dancing with your family while being confined at home. I don't think that's meaningful. You shouldn't do that. Who am I to judge that? I think entertainment and getting connected to people who think like you or like have the same passions or hobbies or whatever is also something that is essential to life and good health. It has been proved that being connected with other humans positively is a factor of keeping good health in these times also. So I'm not here to judge what they're doing, but I want them to have, or I want us to have, enough connectivity and capacity and tools to be able to thrive and not, of course, and as you know, I am ideologically charged, I would say, and not become just I don't know how you say in the English-speaking Caribbean, but here we say bracero. It's the person who just cuts the sugarcane.
Okay.
The sugarcane cutters. We say the bracero digital.
Yes.
Where a digital, where a sugarcane cutter spends 30 years of his life cutting sugarcanes here in the fields and ends up poorer than he started, just in the digital space. So that's a completely different dialogue of how we have people don't become more empowered and change their reality and change their social and economic reality and not just become subjects to data extraction and being the digital avatar being sold here and there and consuming things. So that's a completely, but at least that they have the opportunity to become the good part of that is something we want to ensure, so that they have meaningful connectivity.
Indeed.
So they can be empowered.
Indeed. Yes, because I certainly do take the point, though, that I think, though, it is with, and I say regular use, I guess if people have access every day, that they will figure out ways in which they can continue to leverage and integrate the internet into their lives. So, yes, it may start off as, as you say, funny videos on WhatsApp and browsing social media, but I think eventually there is the potential for it to become more, and they find ways and means to use the internet, to leverage technology as a tool that it is, to improve other aspects of their lives.
Correct.
Okay, folks, thank you so much. I think we're almost at time, and I know we're all so busy these days, and I think this was just a great discussion to just begin to ventilate or continue to ventilate the issue, meaningful connectivity, what it means, what targets are being proposed by A4Ai, and especially when I think, as I've been saying, the term is being used more and more and in different ways. I guess some countries or pundits and experts who are talking may not necessarily be thinking of it from the A4Ai perspective, which are our minimum targets, but really what their different areas of their society might need based on the current realities. But the targets that have been proposed are a good starting point, and as you have been saying, it would be for countries and policymakers to figure out what might be best for their situation. So thank you again.
Thank you, Michelle, and we're open to receive any requests to further discuss that. If any country, I know you have a lot of listeners from different Caribbean countries, policymakers and also academics, and if they want to deepen the conversation with us, please get in touch, and we can say we can drive a pilot in the region on measuring how meaningfully people are connected.
That would be fantastic. And I think especially that whole issue of gender, that is something that I am particularly interested in seeing what the data might show, because I think sadly we don't do as much research as we should, and what might have been available 5-10 years ago, may no longer be our current reality. So it would be really great if we could get
Sure.
some more data and investigations being performed. And thank you so much, Anna. It was lovely to have you on and to hear more about the actual research that is being done and some of the documents that A4Ai is producing.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.
That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICTPulse, or via Twitter @ICTPulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.